All right, welcome to lesson 3. In this class, we're going to look at how to calculate a perfect cube and find the cube root. So to start with, we have to think about our previous lessons. And we're going to recall that if we think about a square, like this beautiful square below, it is a two-dimensional object. Doesn't exist in three-dimensional space. And so if we want to find the amount of space within a square, the amount of space within the square here, what we're doing is we are finding the area of the square. And if we want to find the area of a square, what we need to do is figure out the length of one of the sides of the square. In this case, we can just count it up here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 squares on that side, which means I also have 8 squares on the other side. So if I want to find the area, remember area is equal to length times width. And because it's a square, the sides are the same, so really it's length squared. And in this case, one of my side length is 8, so it would be 8 squared. Now remember, when we're squaring a number, we're taking that number and multiplying it by itself. So I would have 8 times 8, which would equal 64 units squared. Good work. So now it's also important for us to be able to work in the opposite direction. So if we know the area of the square, so I've got this square here, and I know the area inside of it. If we know the area inside of the square, we can find the side length. So if the area of the square is 144 units squared, we can actually find the square root of that number of 144 in order to determine what that side length is. So the square root of 144, I'm going to ask myself, what two numbers do I need to multiply together that are the same numbers that give me 144? So, pause for a second. What do you think? Did you get 12? Yeah, you're right. So you could count the number of squares that are along here, because I tried to make it the same size of a square there. But you could also ask yourself, what two numbers do I know that are the same numbers when I multiply them together gives me an answer of 144. So that is finding the square root. So these skills are the same skills you're going to use when we look at perfect cubes and finding the cube root. All right, so let's apply the same principle to cubes. So a cube is a three-dimensional object. So when we want to find the amount of space within a cube, so if I want to see the amount of space that the whole cube takes up, this is called finding the volume of an object. So remember, when we want to find the formula, or if we want to find the volume of an object, of a square, rectangular prism, we go length times width times height. So the formula for volume is length times width times height. And when we think about a square, the side length is all the same. So it's really just length cubed, which means that you're taking the number for the length of the side and you are multiplying it by itself 3 times. So it'd be length times length times length. So let's use this in order to determine what is the volume of this cube. So if we count the side length, there's 1, 2, 3 there. So the volume for this cube is going to be length cubed. Well, the side length for it is 3. So this is going to be 3 cubed. 3 cubed, we can write that out as 3 times 3 times 3. And if I can do the math for that part, 3 times 3 is 9, and then 9 times 3 is 27. So the volume of that cube is 27 units cubed. Good work. So let's apply this to, what does it mean to cube a number? Well, to cube a number means to multiply that number by itself 3 times. Because a cube is a three-dimensional shape. That's why we use the term cube to just talk about the fact that we're taking a number and multiplying it by itself 3 times. So if I'm looking at 5 cubed, this would be 5 times 5 times 5. So 5 times 5 is 25, and then I have to times it by another 5. 25 times 5 is 125. So 5 cubed is equal to 125. Let's try it for 3. We did it previously when we looked at our other example, but let's do it again. 3 cubed, or 3 to the power 3, means that we're going to take that 3 and multiply it by itself 3 times. We go 3 times 3 times 3. Well, this first 3 times 3 is 9. And then 9 times 3 is 27. So 3 cubed is 27. So a perfect cube is a number that is a cube of an integer. So for 64, this one is a perfect cube because if I think about what 3 numbers, when I multiply them together, 3 numbers that are the same when I multiply them together, that gives me 64. Well, this would be 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. Let's look at the answer here. So 216 is a perfect cube because we can have 3 numbers that are the same be multiplied together and equal to 216. This number is 6, so I can go 6 times 6 times 6. 6 times 6 is 36. 36 times 6 gives me 216. So both 64 and 216 are perfect cubes. All right, the opposite of cubing a number is to find the cube root of a number. So just like we asked ourselves when we were squaring a number, what 2 numbers that are the same, when I multiply themselves, gives me the number that's under the square root sign, we have to think similarly when we're finding the cube root. So we have to think about what 3 numbers, we put a 3 inside of that square root sign to show that it is a cube root. So what 3 numbers can I multiply by itself 3 times will give me the number that's under the square root sign. So then with this one, it's a small number. We have an 8 there. So I wouldn't start with 1 times 1 times 1 because that would just give me 1. But we could try 2. 2 times 2 times 2. Well, let's think that through. So 2 times 2 is 4. If I multiply that times 2 again, that's going to be 8. So the cubed root of 8 is 2. So the cubed root of 8 is equal to 2. Good work. Okay, next one. So we want to find what is the cubed root of 343. So we need to think about what number, when I multiply it by itself 3 times, gives me an answer of 343. So we tried previously 6 times 6 times 6, and that gave us 216. That was a little bit too low. So let's try the next one up. So if we go 7 times 7 times 7, this might work for us. So we have 7 times 7 is 49, and then 49 times 7 is 343. So that's the same number, so that works out. So that means that the cubed root of 343 is equal to 7. All right, let's use this to do a couple of examples. So if I have a cube, I'm just going to draw a general cube here. You can see my artistic skills. If I have a cube and its side length, whoops, I gave away this one. If its volume is 512 meters cubed, and I want to figure out what is its side length, what I'm doing here is finding the cube root of the number. So I have a cube root of 512. So I need to think to myself, what number, when I multiply it by itself 3 times, would give me the number under the square root sign? Well, we just did an example where it was 7 times 7 times 7, and that was a little bit too low. So we're going to work our way up here. So what if we did 8 times 8 times 8? Well, 8 times 8 is 64, and 64 times 8 would be 512. That matches what's underneath the cubed root sign. So we can say the cubed root of 512 is 8. And just another simple example of how we can apply this knowledge. So if we have another cube, draw this one according to the squares, and its side length is 2 centimeters. What is the volume? So remember, volume of a cube is equal to the length cubed. So this is going to be 2 cubed. 2 cubed is equal to 2 times 2 times 2, which means 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. So the side length of that cube is going to be 8 centimeters. Good work, my friends. Thanks for working along with me. Make sure you check the classroom to see when your work is due, and I'll see you in our next class. Have a good night.